Hey, good morning, friends. So good to see you this morning. We're continuing in our activations today, and today we're going to Acts chapter 24. And so we had an amazing activation yesterday. If you didn't hear it, Pastor Lynn was sharing some background about the trial that Paul found himself on. And so we're just going to continue into that today in Acts 24. And the big idea that I want to give us today is that we should not prejudge our pursuit by today's fruit. And so I'm going to talk about what that means. So we find ourselves in Acts 24. Paul is on trial before Marcus Antonius Felix. He was the governor of Rome and the procurator of matters that pertain to Judea. And so he was a man, Felix was a man known by history for his cruelty and his dishonesty. He was a man that was known for ruling based on how it would benefit himself. And so my activation today is going to be very simple. It's that a tree will be known by its fruit eventually. A tree will be known by its fruit eventually, so be a good tree. We should never move our focus from Jesus and from standing on who he made us to be and how he made us to love him and how he made us to love others. We've been called to be people who will stand with integrity even when everything around us and circumstances waver and crumble, and even when in the moment it costs us. So a tree will be known by its fruit eventually, but please don't prejudge your pursuit today by today's fruit. And so here's what happens. Paul's on trial, and the Jewish elders come, and they bring their prosecuting attorney. His name is Tertullus, and he begins his defense. And it sounds so good. But a tree will be known by its fruit eventually, and they keep talking. And they go overboard. They're trying to sway and flatter the governor, and it becomes this nauseating, insincere verbal vomit that is playing to his ego. And then when they come to their defense finally against Paul, you find what they say has no substance. It's extreme yet vague. It's smooth sounding, but it's hollow. And so I'm going to pick up in Acts chapter 24. This starts in verse 2. It says this. It says, Tertullus accused him, saying, "Your Excellency, Felix, under the shadow of your wise leadership, we Jews have experienced a long period of peace. Because of your wise foresight, many reforms are coming to pass in our nation because of you, most honorable Felix. We deeply appreciate this, and we thank you very much. So that I won't weary you with a lengthy presentation, I beg you to hear our brief summary with your customary graciousness." Somebody gag me. Okay, they continue on. They say, "For we have found," now here's their shift. They've talked about Felix, they flattered him, and now they're going to talk about Paul. They say, "We have found this man to be a contagious plague, a seditious man who continually stirs up riots among Jews all over the world. He's become a ringleader of the sect known as the Nazarenes. He's even attempted to desecrate our temple, which is why we had him arrested. We sought to judge him according to our law, but Commander Lysias came with great force and snatched him away from our hands and sent him here to you. He's the one that ordered his accusers to come to you so that you could interrogate him and ascertain for yourself that all these charges we're bringing against him are true." And all the Jews present joined in the verbal attack, saying, "Yep, it's true." It's funny to me because when you read this, in both the compliments and the accusation, here's what you hear. There's lots of colorful, flowery, emotional language, but they said nothing. They show up and they say, Paul is a contagious plague. He's seditious. He continually stirs up riots all over the world. He's a dangerous ringleader who has a plot to desecrate the temple. And all the Jews are like, "Yep, that's it." And I want you to understand something. When they didn't bring any facts but all these accusations, we have to remember that our enemy is known as the accuser. You're often going to know accusation by its emotion. You'll often know accusation because it has an emotion to elicit guilt, shame, or to exercise control. Accusation always wants to stir up a mob. I love some words that I read from author Brian Zahnd. He said, "Never trust an angry mob." Have you ever had somebody talk bad about you? And not just once or twice, but maybe continually. Have you ever had somebody spread things about you that aren't true? that have gotten offended with you, and instead of coming to you in the way the Bible would say, to actually bring their offense before you, brother to brother or sister to sister, they've gone and tried to poison those around you with rumors. Have you ever had people who've tried to sway other people behind closed doors? Or do you have a friend that's always talking bad about everyone else? I would challenge us this morning to consider the source. A tree will be known by its fruit. So I want to ask you this in what you're listening to today. And this can be true of your friends, of social media, of the news outlets you go to. It's true of spiritual teaching that you're getting. I would ask this question: does their life look like a tree you want to be? Does their life look like a tree you want to be? And if not, stop eating the fertilizer they're planted in. If their life does not look like a tree that you want to be, stop eating and listening to and taking in the fertilizer they're planted in, because a tree will be known by its fruit. I want to go further and say this. If you're watching people that are living as the wrong kind of tree, that what they're putting out is poisonous, it's easy to get worked up by that. And we've got to refuse to do that, because there's a scheme of the enemy that he wants, however he can, to take your eyes off of Jesus, to take your eyes off of the joy that is already yours, that Jesus already purchased for you. He wants to take your eyes off the important work that you're doing, so that you would come down from the unique ways that you receive and release love. And he would love for you to join in the game of accusation and blame. But a tree will be known by its fruit. So listen, if someone in your life is spouting off flattery, they're just insincere and they try to cheat to get ahead. Maybe they're at your work and they just know how to kiss the boss's butt and just to go say everything, and you're like, well, they're getting promoted and I'm not getting promoted, or you're finding somebody in your life that is surrounded with accusations and drama. This is my challenge to you. Don't play the game. Refuse to play that game. Forgive them and overflow in your heart with love. Because listen, out of the overflow of their heart, their mouth is speaking. They're showing that they are miserable, and God will handle it. But you keep being a good tree. Keep your eyes on Jesus. For Paul in this moment, it would have been so easy for him to get caught up and to lose it with the ammo they gave him. We know from the Bible that Paul was actually amazing at logic. So listen, he could have wiped the floor. He could have spent hours and wiped the floor, giving time after time after time after time, showing that their vague and emotional accusations weren't true. And he could have swayed the whole crowd to love him instead of loving them. But listen, Paul takes the opportunity, because he knows who he is. Paul takes the opportunity not to make this about him and not to make this about them, but to make this about Jesus, and not to make it about his reputation, but promoting Jesus' reputation. So it goes on in Acts 24. This starts in verse 10. It says, the governor motioned that it was Paul's turn to speak. So he began to answer the accusations. He says, because I know that you've been a judge over this nation many years, I'll gladly respond in my defense. And at this point, he's done. He's not going to flatter Felix any further. And now he's just going to get in and answer the question. He says, you can easily verify that about 12 days ago, I went to Jerusalem to worship. No one found me arguing with anyone or causing any trouble among the people in the synagogues or in the temple or anywhere in the city. They're completely unable to prove these accusations they make against me. But I do confess this to you. I worship the God of our Jewish ancestors as a follower of the way, which they call a sect. For I believe everything that's written in the law and the prophets, and my hope is in God, the same hope even my accusers have embraced, the hope of a resurrection from the dead of both the righteous and the unrighteous. That's why I seek with all my heart to have a clean conscience toward God and others. After being away from Jerusalem several years, I returned to bring my people gifts for the poor. And I was in the temple, ritually purified and presenting my offering to God when they seized me. I had no noisy crowd around me. I wasn't causing trouble or making disturbance whatsoever. It was a group of Jews from Western Turkey who were being unruly. They're the ones who should be here now to bring their charges if they have anything against me. Or at least the man standing before you should clearly state what they found me guilty of when I stood before the Jewish Supreme Council. Unless it's the one thing I passionately spoke about when I stood among them. I'm on trial today only because of my belief that there's a resurrection from the dead. I want to tell you this. Listen, when we live with our eyes on man, all of our efforts will be going to protecting our reputation. When we live with our eyes on man, all of our efforts will go to protect our reputation. But when we live with our eyes on God, every word is an opportunity to promote his reputation. Paul at this place comes and he's very clear in what he gives. He gives verifiable facts. He says, listen, that all these emotional accusations they've made, here's the actual truth. 12 days ago, I'm at the temple. I brought gifts. You can check the treasury. Here I am. There's no witness to point at any place. They just have these emotional accusations. But then he makes a beeline in the middle of he's defending for his life right now. This could cost him everything. He could be executed for this. And what he wants to spend most of his time in this speech talking about is his hope in the resurrection of the dead so that Felix could come to know it. He makes a beeline to talk about hope in Jesus. And it works because Felix at this point, it says, pauses the trial. He puts Paul on house arrest so that Paul will stay in Rome, but he lets all of his friends and family come see him. And further than that, he's stirred. After this moment, Felix doesn't ask to speak to the Jewish leaders again because, listen, flattery will be forgotten. But the substance of real love, you can't escape that. So it says this, it continues on. It says, several days later, Felix came back with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, and they sent for Paul, and they listened as he shared with them about faith in Jesus, the Anointed One. Now listen, they called for him. He's on house arrest. But because a tree will be known by its fruit eventually, they recognized in their heart that there was a substance to Paul that was an empty vapor from his accusers, and they had to hear him. And so they said, talk as much as you want to talk. And so it says, Paul spoke for hours and hours and hours. He spoke about the true righteousness, about self-control and the coming judgment. And Felix became terrified and said, leave me for now. I'll send for you later when it's more convenient. See, he expected to receive a bribe from Paul for his release, so that for that reason, he would send for Paul from time to converse with him. And 2 years later, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and before he left office, he decided to leave Paul in prison as a political favor to the Jews. And so, this is what I want you to see. When we live with our eyes on Jesus, committed to bless man, God will put you before kings and princes. He will put you before people everywhere who will have to hear the hope in you, because flattery will be forgotten, but the substance of bold, unapologetic love and power stays with people. Felix expected Paul to be like all the others and sell out, and Paul wouldn't do it, and Felix couldn't shake that. Felix kept calling for him, and I'm sure that it unsettled him even more every time, even after he left, that he couldn't shake the fact that this man wouldn't sell out. In this talk of the resurrection of the dead, there was a power there that wasn't in any other flattering voice that he heard. At the end of this story, this is what we see. Each tree is being known by its fruit. The Jewish leaders, they're full of envy and anger, and they need to put an enemy on trial. And there are some people right now in our life that as they're speaking, the fruit coming out of their tree is they need to be angry at somebody. There needs to be somebody to blame, and that's the fruit of an orphan spirit. Felix, at the end of the story, he's still obsessed with himself. He's still doing whatever it takes to get ahead, and he's still empty at the end of the night. But Paul at the end of the story, though, he's been held in a prison for a crime he never committed. He was only giving hope, and he's been brought all the way around the world to have to defend for his life. And Paul is still adoring Jesus and forgiving man, and we recognize that he's only in a prison for his body because his soul is singing and screaming, and the gospel is continually advanced. I'll prove it to you. I doubt that you know very much about Felix. As for the Jewish leaders who were there that day, we don't know any of their names, and all of their words are a vapor. But Paul has stood with a prolific impact because he wouldn't sell out to Felix, because he stayed in that prison in that moment. Every church that bears the name of Jesus Christ has stood upon the words and the promises that the Holy Spirit prompted through Paul and the legacy of faith he has. So here's my challenge to you this morning. A tree will be known by its fruit eventually, but please hear me right now. Don't prejudge your pursuit based on today's fruit. Don't prejudge the value of where you're walking for God or how effective you are in the kingdom by today's opinions, today's reputation, today's report. Don't obsess with results and opinions and what others think. Don't obsess where in the moment it looks bad. Listen, I'm talking to some of you parents right now. In the moment, you might not be winning the popularity contest with your children because you're standing on righteousness. But I promise you, a tree will be known by its fruit eventually. So Paul, at the end, he's left in prison for 2 years, and then Felix sells him out. But if you've read your Bible, you know that Paul was just a part of a pattern of a great cloud of witnesses who stood in faith, yet they did not yet see God's promises. And for all of them, every one of those trees were eventually known by their fruit. Because every Joseph has to face a prison. And every Daniel has to face a lion's den. And every Elijah has to be hidden by a stream and fed by ravens. And every David has to spend time in a cave hiding from Saul. But a tree will be known by its fruit eventually. Doing good today doesn't mean that you'll be treated good today all the time, but you will, beloved one. From your family, from your friends, and for generations to come, you will. Your job and my only job this morning is to love him, to be lost in the wonder and the joy and the freedom and the forgiveness and the grace and the hope and the love that is overflowing, that was purchased completely once for all 2,000 years ago, that is completely yours today. Will you just receive that and live in wonder? Our only job today is to turn our eyes away from the drama, away from the accusations, away from every other kind of tree, and turn our eyes upon Jesus. We won't always see the harvest of fruit in this season. A seed that is planted in the ground often takes time for it to sprout up and for the fruit to be seen. And so I sense right now that there's somebody that is having a hard time, and the enemy is lying to you. The accuser is coming in with emotional language and saying, because you're not seeing fruit today, there's something you're doing that must not be pleasing God, or you're just failing. And I want to challenge you so boldly, please do not prejudge your fruit right now to tell you what your pursuit is. Keep your eyes on him. I want to close this morning just by reading this prayer over you in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. It's the words of Jesus. And for you right now, if you're standing faithful and life is just hard, if you're standing faithful and people are talking about you, if you're standing faithful and there's accusation, I want to challenge you, don't play the game. Keep your eyes on him, and a good tree will be known by good fruit eventually. Jesus calls you in this way today. He says, are you weary? Are you carrying a heavy burden? Then come to me. I will refresh your life, for I am your oasis. Not those other people, not what they're saying, not their opinion, not the popularity polls. I am your oasis. So simply join your life with mine. Learn my ways, and you'll discover that I'm gentle, I'm humble, and I'm easy to please. You'll find refreshment and rest in me, for all that I require of you will be pleasant and easy to bear. So I want to ask you just to pray with me right now. I want to ask if right now you'd make a decision, a conscious decision to release the people who have hurt you. To release people right now, the flatterers in your life, at your workplace, at your job, that have cheated to get ahead, that have told lies, that they've walked in dishonesty and it looks like they've just leapt above you and their dishonesty is hurting you. I want to ask right now that you would forgive and release, because listen to me. This is what you need to know, child of God. Creation is yearning to know the sons and daughters of God. Their tree is showing by their fruit right now. They're showing, flatterers are showing that there's something that is hollow. There's an orphan spirit there that needs to know their father. Don't hate them. Pray for them. Those who've spoken poison about you, those who've been swept up believing their lies. Right now, maybe there are people, I know in my life, right now, there are people that are believing lies about me, and it breaks my heart. There are people believing things and things that have been said about me by certain people that just aren't true. I'm going to challenge you this morning to know that a curse without cause will not stand. Out of the overflow of their heart, they're showing their fruit. Refuse to play that game. Trust God to be your defender and simply be a good tree. I want to tell you, your life, it's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. It's just eyes on Him. Just do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. You are a good tree. Beloved one, just put your eyes on Him. A tree will be known by its fruit eventually. Right now, I pray for you that you would receive the Father's delight. And I just speak over you right now. You are a good tree. You're a good mom. You're a good dad. You're a good worker. You're a glorious child of God. You're a good neighbor. Don't judge your pursuit by today's fruit. Would you receive the grace from your Father right now to hear the places that He's saying, well done? Don't look to the crowd or the angry mob or the current popularity poll to tell you how you're doing. Just, beloved one, right now, eyes on Him. God wasn't through with Paul, and God isn't through with you. I believe for you and for me that our best days are still ahead, and a good tree will be known by its fruit eventually. Let's keep being good trees. God bless you. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you again at our activation tomorrow at 9 a.m.